Coming up on Bridge City News, a warning from the Canadian Public Health Agency about American red onions which have been linked to a salmonella outbreak in Western Canada. We hear from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who says he regrets that he awarded We Charity with a $500 million contract. And many gathered at Galt Gardens in Lethbridge last night to shed light on the human trafficking issues which are still taking place in our country.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The federal government has issued a health warning and says to avoid eating red onions imported from the U.S. that have been linked to a salmonella outbreak. The Public Health Agency of Canada says it is working with its counterparts in the United States to investigate an outbreak of salmonella infections across 5 provinces, including here in Alberta. Food distributor Cisco has recalled 10 and 25-pound bags of Imperial Fresh Jumbo red onions in Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. Officials say Canadian red onions are not affected by the advisory. So far, the agency has confirmed 114 cases of Salmonella Newport illness, including 55 new infections since last Friday. Canadian National Railway says it set a new record by moving more than 30 million metric tons of grain across Canada during this crop year. CN says more than 28 million metric tons of that grain was from Western Canada. The railway says it is prepared to move up to 7,600 bulk and processed hopper cars per week outside of winter and up to 6,100 per week during winter in the upcoming crop year. CN says it has improved service thanks to insight and feedback from the agriculture community. Alberta has more doctors per capita than the national average. That's according to new data released by the Canadian Institute of Health Information. It shows the number of physicians increased by 12% from 2015 to 2019, while the population only grew by 6%. The study says our province has more physicians per person than the national average and more than BC, Ontario, or Quebec. Minister of Health Tyler Shandro says the new information confirms that new approaches are needed for paying and working with doctors. Shandro says the province spends 15% more per capita on physicians than the national average, but are not seeing better results. Alberta is reporting 5 more COVID-19 related deaths and 113 new cases. All 5 deaths were connected to an outbreak at the Good Samaritan Southgate Care Centre in Edmonton, where 70 people are infected with the novel coronavirus. Our Chief Provincial Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says pharmacies are expanding a program that will allow people without symptoms to be tested. Asymptomatic Albertans would have to phone or make an appointment for such a test. Lethbridge Transit will be back to its normal summer schedule starting August 4th. It will, however, be mandatory to wear a mask. City Council passed that bylaw recently, and they're asking for your cooperation in order to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Masks have been mandated by City Council, and that if they do not have a mask, to please put one on. We are instructing the community to please abide by that mandate and do the right thing and put the masks on. We won't refuse a ride, but we will monitor. So if we start to see too many people that are coming without masks and unwilling to wear it, then we will have to probably adjust how we're providing the service. What I see from the community and what we've heard from the community is they're very excited to see conventional transit launched again. There is lots of feedback on the Facebook and on the Twitter accounts, basically stating the thankfulness for going back to conventional transit and putting safeguards in place for the public.
City officials say answers to questions about the recent mask-wearing bylaw can be found on the MyRide app. The University of Lethbridge is making masks mandatory on campus beginning Monday, August the 10th. University officials say wearing face coverings or non-medical masks at indoor spaces at the university is for the safety of the campus and local community. Those working on campus will not be required to wear a mask in their offices unless they are located in an area that faces the public. The mask policy will also apply to summer camps on campus. Yesterday was World Day Against Human Trafficking. Now, many in Lethbridge joined in with a group called Operation Underground Railroad at Galt Gardens to generate awareness in our community. Team lead Jeremy Gook says more needs to be done to give kids a voice.
If you think of every 30 seconds a child being trafficked as opposed to, just imagine if we thought of every 30 seconds a child was getting COVID or dying from COVID, it would be all over the media, it would be all over the place, but why isn't trafficking? Why isn't human trafficking out there? Why aren't we in people's faces about it? Really, it's a beautiful day to get out in the community and tell people about this. And like was mentioned, it is dark, but the beauty behind it is that Operation Underground Railroad is saving lives. They are, in countries all over the world, they are doing operations. They're saving children. They're putting traffickers behind bars, and things are happening. But the beauty of today is we're getting loud.
A recent federal study says Nova Scotia has the highest rate of human trafficking incidents in Canada, with 2.1 victims for every 100,000 people. Police in Fort Macleod need our help finding a teenager who's gone missing. RCMP say 15-year-old Lenny Braverock was last seen July 30th and may be in the Lethbridge or Standoff areas. They're concerned about her well-being. Braverock is described as Indigenous female, 6'2", 160 pounds, black hair and brown eyes, black leggings or jeans, a black t-shirt, and she may also be wearing white high-top runners. She may also have a blue and black backpack. If you've seen her, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Today marks the start of the August-long weekend, and that means tourists will be out in full force at Waterton Lakes National Park. As Micah Quinn explains, the town has had to rebuild after the Keno wildfire from 3 years ago, but the community is going strong now through hard work and perseverance.
With beautiful scenery like Cameron Falls, it's no wonder Waterton Lakes National Park is so popular. And with the August-long weekend finally upon us, the park is extremely busy.
Because of the weather, we're expecting this summer's August long weekend to be just as busy as all the others. As such, we're hoping that people will plan ahead, check out our web pages to make sure that they know what's going on and what's open.
Just 3 years ago, Waterton Lakes National Park was ravaged by the Keno wildfire, and they recorded their third driest summer on record.
The Keno wildfire had quite a significant effect on certainly the environment, but also the visitor facilities and services that we offer. So there are several things that are still affected by the Keno wildfire.
For the Bayshore Inn Resort and Spa, the August-long weekend is their busiest weekend of the year.
It's bigger than July long, it's bigger than August long. So for us, we're expecting nothing less. The mountains are calling. It's perfect weather this weekend. Waterton, there's no prettier place, in my opinion, in all of Alberta than there is in Waterton Lakes National Park. So we're expecting a huge weekend, lots of foot traffic, lots of day traffic.
Suleiman says for his business, tourism is integral, but this year it's been different with not having any American or international traffic.
But Albertans, as well as the rest of Canada, has really been supporting and really been heading to the mountains. So we've been pleasantly surprised with how busy it's been and very happy that so many people get to see Waterton Lakes National Park.
Parks Canada says Waterton won't have any events due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but there is still a lot of sightseeing to do in the park. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Calgary's Public School Board says at-home schooling offering to kids in the fall will look a little bit different from emergency learning in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic. The board says it will offer in-home schooling for families uncomfortable with sending kids back to class that combines online classes and independent work. It says it will not offer the same supports as in-person learning and needs more parental involvement. The board is also recommending that staff and students wear masks in school and on buses. The masks will only be required, however, for the children who get sick while at school. A Calgary man facing 4 terrorism-related charges has been granted bail, but with a number of restrictions. One of them is that he must wear an ankle tracking device paid for by his family, and that his release will be supervised by the RCMP. Hussein Borat was charged last week with participation in activity of a terrorism group and commission of an offense for a terrorist group. Police allege he traveled to Syria between May of 2013 and June of 2014 to join Islamic State militants and committed the offense of kidnapping while working with those militants. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who testified recently before the Federal Finance Committee about the We Charity scandal, says there was no conflict of interest in regards to the multi-million-dollar student-run volunteer program.
The due diligence, extra due diligence I asked for was about really being able to stand in front of Canadians and in front of critiques from the opposition that were undoubtedly to come because of this program's links to me and to a number of members of my government, that this was the right recommendation made independently of any of those issues. The due diligence I pushed on was in order to make sure that this was indeed the right program, the only program only way to be able to move forward with the program.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also says Canadians can now begin downloading a smartphone app meant to warn users if they've been near someone who tested positive for COVID-19.
As of this morning, the COVID Alert app is ready to download through the App Store on your phone. Right now, it's connected to the Ontario health system, but we know other provinces will be joining in soon. So people across the country can and should download it today.
Trudeau says the app does not collect any personal information and it is completely voluntary. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, per-person federal program spending has reached the highest level in Canadian history. Fergus Hodgson, Director of Econ Americas and Research Associate with the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, says Canada has spent big bucks during this pandemic.
But in Canada's case, the spending has been just outrageous. So there's a new report out from a sister think tank to the Frontier Centre, which I work for, and they have shown that basically the spending right now from Ottawa, so just the federal level, not considering all the provincial and local governments, is 50% greater than it was during the past recession and 47% greater than it was simply last year. So we are in uncharted territory in terms of spending. This is greater than ever recorded in Canadian history.
Catch the full interview with Fergus Hodgson and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our show. South of the border, a young paralegal and a car mechanic both received life-saving double lung transplants at a hospital in Chicago after COVID-19 destroyed both of their lungs.
Lung transplant isn't for every patient with COVID-19, but it does offer some of the critically ill patients another option for survival. Mara and Brian are living proof of that. For 6 weeks, Mara fought for her life in the COVID ICU. The virus completely destroyed her lungs.
And they made the track just with the intentions of saying goodbye. Luckily, once they arrived, my mother and my two sisters, the medical team was able to stabilize me, and they were explained the option of lung transplantation, and my mother agreed to it.
This disease is not a joke.
It's not a hoax.
This is true. I was perfectly healthy. This thing took me down hard. I thought that was it. I was done. There's no more. But they gave me hope, told me transplant.
Authorities have ordered some evacuations due to a wildfire that is currently burning in the Angeles National Forest near Azusa in Southern California. Helicopters and a converted jumbo jet were working to douse the flames burning close to a reservoir. U.S. President Donald Trump walked back his suggestion that Election Day in his country should be postponed. He says his idea was not about undermining the foundation of American democracy, but ensuring results were ready in a timely fashion amid the coronavirus pandemic. Americans go to the polls in November.
I want to be standing, hopefully, hand held high, big victory, because we're doing things with our country that I think nobody else could have done. You can forge ballots. This is much easier for foreign countries. Go ahead, Steve.
But delay in the election is probably a non-starter. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I just feel I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. But I also don't want to have to wait for 3 months and then find out that the ballots are all missing and the election doesn't mean anything. That's what's going to happen, Steve. That's common sense. And everyone knows it. Smart people know it. Stupid people may not know it.
Persecuted Christians are facing the horrific dilemma of being refused COVID-19 aid if they refuse to renounce their faith. As we hear in this next report, Open Doors is mobilizing their partners in some of the worst-hit countries to provide vital emergency food supplies.
Persecution watchdog Open Doors UK and Ireland says it's inundated with reports of Christians worldwide who are being asked to renounce their faith in exchange for emergency COVID-19 aid. Christians from countries including Bangladesh, India, Sudan and Malaysia say they're facing an ultimatum. They must abandon their faith if they want to receive emergency food. Ilya Jardi, Open Doors senior analyst on freedom of religion and belief in sub-Saharan Africa, says the biggest challenge in this region is how much the Christians rely on the support of their community in the midst of a crisis like this.
This kind of persecution is coming from the community. It's a domestic persecution. When a part of the community will turn against them and ask them to renounce, otherwise they will not get that kind of support from the community. The other scenario or case is aid from government and sometimes even from international NGOs are channeled through local community leaders. So that's when the community leaders, most of the time from the predominantly religious group, will even at the end of the day and ask them to choose between to renounce to their faith or to get the aid. If not, they will not get it.
And Jardi concluded by urging prayer for Open Doors partners who are delivering vital aid in the most affected communities.
We pray for the protection, for the safe delivery of this really needed aid so that it can reach the marginalized group, people who are in desperate situation because of their faith.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
The classic movie Grease with Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta is now playing at the Movie Mill, along with the family film Napoleon Dynamite. With more, here's this week's Movie Mill Minute.
Ex-heroin junkie Daniel Leger gets involved in a drug deal with the wrong people for the wrong reasons. When the deal goes sour, Daniel gets thrown into a Thai prison and slapped with a 100-year sentence. The news of his conviction captures the attention of Globe and Mail journalist Victor Malarek, who decides to go after the shady undercover cops responsible for wrongly accusing Daniel.
Daniel Leger is a drug addict. Can't trust anything he says.
What if I found out that you guys paid for Leger's trip down to Thailand?
I'd be very careful before I print anything about this case.
Or what?
Experience the friendships, romances, and adventures of a group of high school kids in the 1950s. Welcome to the singing and dancing world of Grease, the most successful movie musical of all time.
John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John explode across the motion picture screen in Grease, the movie filled with more song, more dance, more of everything that makes a great musical unforgettable.
In small-town Preston, Idaho, awkward teen Napoleon has trouble fitting in. After his grandmother is injured in an accident, his life is made even worse when his strange Uncle Rico shows up to keep an eye on him. With no safe haven at home or at school, Napoleon befriends the new kid, Pedro, a Hispanic boy who speaks little English. Together, the two launch a campaign to run for class president.
Is Trisha here? Is that on my driveway? It's my ride.
Great classic movies at the Mill once again. We had another heat warning from Environment Canada today. The sunshine and hot temps will continue throughout the weekend. Full weather details are on deck. It should be a beautiful weekend for camping. Lots of sunshine and hot temperatures are expected. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the forecast. Jeanette, it may be a good idea, however, to pitch your tent under a shady tree.
Yeah, no kidding, Hal, or maybe even a tent with some air conditioning in it, because that heat warning is expected to stay with us for a little while longer in southern Alberta, including Lethbridge and surrounding areas there. Overnight low tonight, 16 degrees. We can be seeing some partly cloudy skies this evening. Possibility of some showers after midnight and into tomorrow morning, a 30% chance of showers as well. Then it's going to clear up. High tomorrow, 31 degrees. For our Saturday, Humidex is at 36. So it's going to feel a lot hotter out there. 17 degrees is the overnight low for our Saturday. And then as we get into the rest of the long weekend, Sunday and Monday, 32 degrees with lots of sunshine for both Sunday and Monday. The sunshine continuing on into Tuesday with a high of 24 degrees. Overnight on Tuesday, we could see a 60% chance of showers, and then a mix of sun and cloud for Wednesday with 25 degrees. 27 is the high for next Thursday with partly cloudy skies as well. Now, the almanac tells us that this time of year, the high should be around 26 degrees. We are certainly higher than that range. The average low, 11. 34 degrees was the high temperature. That was back in 1973, and our lowest temperature was in 1968. It was 3 degrees. The sunrise was at 6:01 this morning, 1 minute later than it was yesterday. Sunset this evening, 9:14 p.m., meaning our days are getting just a smidge shorter than they have been. Let's see what's happening on the west coast tomorrow. Lots of sunshine. 24 degrees is the high in Victoria, 25 in Vancouver. Sunny skies across Alberta tomorrow, 29 degrees in Calgary, and same thing for Edmonton. Calgary could see a possibility of some showers tonight, but that's going to clear up by tomorrow. The rest of the prairies, look at all that sunshine. Saskatoon's high, 27. Same thing for Regina. Winnipeg should see a lovely day tomorrow as well. 25 degrees is their high with sunny skies. Now, as we look further east into central Canada, mix of sun and cloud expected for Toronto, 29 degrees, 30 degrees expected in Ottawa under sunny skies, sunshine also expected in Montreal, 29 degrees there. Now, as we look further into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton's high tomorrow, 28 degrees, mix of sun and cloud. Charlottetown and Halifax both could be seeing chances of showers tomorrow afternoon with a mix of sun and cloud, 22 the high in Charlottetown, 28 over in Halifax. There could be some fog also expected there. Now, St. John's, Newfoundland, same thing. We could see some periods of drizzle and some fog dissipating by the afternoon. 21 degrees is their high there. And there you go. That is your weather.
Today's weather highlights are brought to you by Mint Smartwash. Refresh your ride in less time with more shine.
Economic growth in Canada improved significantly since COVID-19 lockdowns began to ease. Stats Canada says gross domestic product grew by 4.5%, beating predictions of 3.5% and a sharp reversal from the 11.6% decline in April. The federal agency says rebounds in May were seen in multiple industries, including retail trade, which registered a 16.4% bump. It also saw 5% growth in June, but overall predicts the economy will still record a contraction of 12% for the second quarter. Air Canada suffered a $1.75 billion second quarter loss as it reduced its network capacity by 92% due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. The airline says passenger revenues dropped by 95% from a year ago, while it burned through $19 million of cash per day. The company's CEO is calling on Ottawa to loosen what it says is one of the most severe aviation lockdown regimes in the world. Company officials say a return to 2019 passenger levels could be longer than 3 years from now. TELUS says its net income fell 39% to $315 million in its second quarter as the pandemic lowered wireless roaming revenue. The Vancouver-based company says it was partly offset by higher wireline data service margins and cost-cutting programs. Revenue was up nearly 4% to $3.73 billion. TELUS recorded 61,000 mobile phone net additions and 47,000 wireline customer additions with a low-paid customer loss of 0.59%. The oil and gas sector was promised $1 billion to help clean up abandoned oil wells. But is that enough? David Yeager is an energy policy analyst, and he says it's a start, but really, what is next for our hard-hit energy sector?
The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how.
Mr. Yeager will have more on how the oil and gas sector is trying to rebuild coming up after business news. Amazon is one step closer to outer space. The online shopping giant has received U.S. government approval to put more than 3,200 satellites into orbit that would beam the internet back down to Earth. Amazon says the satellites could provide internet to parts of the world that don't have it. It also becomes a new business model for Amazon, which says it will spend $10 billion on the initiative called Project Kuiper. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 130 points on the day to finish at 16,169. The Dow was up 114 points to 26,428. The S&P 500 was up 24 points to 3271, and the Nasdaq was up 157 to 10,745. Oil was up 52 cents to $40.44 per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $1.81. Gold was up almost $19, $18.98 to $19.75.62 an ounce, and silver was up 86 cents to $24.36 an ounce. Wheat is at $226 per metric ton, barley's at $233, canola's at $4.92, and corn is at $228 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $1.13 to $107.88, feeder cattle were up $1.80 to $146.23, and lean hogs were up 58 cents to $52. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 74.56 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Ottawa has issued a health warning and says to avoid eating red onions imported from the United States that have been linked to a salmonella outbreak. The Public Health Agency of Canada says it's working with its counterparts in the U.S. to investigate an outbreak of salmonella infections across 5 provinces, including here in Alberta. Food distributor Cisco has recalled 10 and 25-pound bags of Imperial Fresh Jumbo Red Onions in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. Officials say Canadian red onions are not affected by the advisory. Coming up, UCN's Jeanette O'Shea chats with Fergus Hodgson with the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, who says Ottawa spent more for in-program spending during the pandemic than any time in Canadian history. That interview is coming up.
After months of COVID-19 restrictions causing a full economic shutdown of our country and others worldwide, what will be the result? Our guest today is the Director of Econ Americas and a research associate for the Frontier Center for Public Policy. Fergus Hodgson joins us today from Houston, Texas. Welcome to the show, Fergus. Great to have you on today.
Thank you, Jeanette. It's my privilege to be with you.
Excellent. Now, Fergus, there's been some debate over the past few months on whether or not it's been a good idea to shut down the economy during this COVID pandemic. Health experts, of course, are saying it's more than necessary for the good of public health, while perhaps some business owners or even economists think that it's not such a great idea. Where do you sit on this debate?
Sure. It's a really difficult question, but the first maybe angle to address is what are we considering here? The problem is that we're dealing with health professionals and politicians who are basically looking to mitigate all risk, all casualties, right? And economists, we think in terms of trade-offs. We know that there can be some deaths caused by the virus. There can also be deaths brought about by a shutdown of the economy, because we know that a poorer economy brings suicides, it brings lower wages or salaries, and that brings shorter lifespans, broken marriages, whatever it may be. There are all these secondary factors, so we seek to bring a balance. And the truth is, it's very hard to know in such with such limited information initially how to make that trade-off. The truth is, though, now the information is in, and we know that only a small proportion of the society is vulnerable to this, and therefore the lockdown should be removed immediately, or should have been removed earlier than it has been. It's gone on far too long. I'm here in Texas, and people are basically back to regular life.
Oh, wow. Wow. In short order, too. I know things are starting to open up here as well. Now, do you think that governments worldwide overreacted to the threat of COVID-19 by shutting down their economies?
Immensely so, and it not just by shutting down the economies, but in Canada's case, the spending has been just outrageous. So there's a new report out from a sister think tank to the Frontier Center, which I work for, and they have shown that basically the spending right now from Ottawa, so just the federal level, not considering all the provincial and local governments, is 50% greater than it was during the past recession, and 47% greater than it was simply last year. So we are in uncharted territory in terms of spending. This is greater than ever recorded in Canadian history. And it is already prior to the recession, I wrote an article about why bankruptcies were spiking in Canada, because already Canadians were suffering under too heavy taxes, under debt loads they could not pay. And now we've just added a whole layer of enormous indebtedness to the Canadian public. And in terms of irresponsible spending, just 1 month ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised $850 million in aid to foreign nations at this time, as though Canada can afford this. It's outrageous. That really Canada cannot. She's in dire straits. And so we have a combination of both economic lockdown and then outrageous spending, and so that's going to fix the initial problem. The initial problem is the lockdown. We need to remove that, and we can get on with our lives.
And Fergus, here in Canada, due to responses to the recession and COVID-19, per person federal program spending will reach an estimated $13,226. So this is a national record, but not necessarily in a good way.
No, and if you think about it, let's say only half of Canadians actually are taxpayers, right? Other people are children or retired or students, whatever it may be. And so each person shouldering, let's say about $25,000 per year is a huge burden. That's why the tax day gets pushed out further and further each year. A larger proportion of the year is devoted to collecting taxes. And the truth is, when you burden the population with higher and higher taxes, it's the compliance that comes with it. Canada has a far too complicated and burdensome compliance process for taxation. And so we are basically guaranteeing an economically stalled nation for a generation to come. And I can just say this too. I'm a Canadian citizen living in Houston, Texas. What incentive does it give to people like me to make a home in Canada? It really is saying you can look forward to this. And so it's just frustrating, to be frank, because many of us have this desire. We have family there. We would like to make a home, and we feel as though petty games now, or irresponsibility now, is condemning the future.
Mm-hmm. What kind of, like, what do you think spending like this could do to Canada?
Well, there's a great deal of evidence to show that once indebtedness reaches 100% of GDP, it stifles economic growth. And so the prosperity that Canadians have enjoyed for a century or more will become less and less. So the advantage over the nations we're giving aid to will be less and less, such that the idea of us giving aid to them becomes an irony. And so largely, we just find Canada becoming less competitive relative to other nations such as Australia, the United States, where I'm from, New Zealand. And so you will see, which is somewhat of a strange thing, but you will see a hollowing out of the country, that more people will come south to the United States. I go to business school here in Houston, and we have many Canadian students who come down because they say, lower taxes, much better salaries, lower cost of living. It makes sense. And I don't want that to happen I don't want this trend to get even worse, right? So right now, the disparity from only last year, which was supposed to be a record already, is enormous. So you can take your pick, whether it's sending money to fund abortions abroad or giving money to international students in Canada. This spending is totally unnecessary. It has nothing to do with fixing the coronavirus. And so we're dealing with basically a self-made crisis. The lockdown and the irresponsible spending are far worse than the actual coronavirus.
So in your opinion, is this irresponsible spending, or is it something that the country had no choice in doing?
Well, that's a tough question. I do think it is irresponsible, but you can understand the argument from those people who have been shut down to say, well, if you're going to stop us from doing any business, how can we pay our bills, right? So in some ways, they're breaking your leg and then handing you a crutch, right? So you've been hurt and then helped to get by. In terms of irresponsibility, at this point, with the evidence in, it's becoming more and more irresponsible, and it shows the priorities of those in Ottawa to expand their control, their reach, and even their surveillance apparatus. To be frank, I've written also for the Frontier Centre about how right now you see there are 5 signs that the surveillance state in Canada is at a record level, that the tracking and monitoring of us is just far beyond what has been known previously.
Wow. Well, you had mentioned earlier of foreign aid that Canada does send a lot of money overseas to different countries for foreign aid, specifically in this COVID-19 pandemic. Do you want to discuss that a little bit? I believe that you wrote an article in the Epoch Times about that.
Yeah, so the problem is that people take foreign aid at face value, that it's somehow there to help foreign nations. Yet that's simply not the case. There's strong research now that's been building up for years showing that the vast majority of that money goes to either corrupt rulers in third world nations or to cronies within our own government or contractors working with them, NGOs. And so the real motivations are basically, maybe parasitism is too strong, but big crony enjoyment, so people enjoying taxpayer funds for their own wishes, and then politicians using it as a way to buy clout. And in this case, Canada is making there's not even veiled attempt to get a UN Security Council seat, and she is buying that support from other countries. And the tragic thing about this is that you're only buying fair weather friends. Right? You're not getting ideological support. You're trying to get a seat on the UN Security Council, which I don't even know why we want. And spending taxpayer money for that. So the latest is big money going to Venezuela. I can guarantee you that money will be wasted. It's going to a socialist regime, and they are outbidding, I think it's Norway and Ireland, to try and get the Security Council seat. Let them have it. They can have that seat, and we don't need to outbid them on foreign aid spending.
Wow, so you're saying there's a vested interest there?
Yeah, it's not really hidden. I mean, basically, I can't remember when the actual vote is coming up. It's very soon, but it's well known that right now Trudeau and I guess the Liberal Party would like to have the Security Council seat as a way to say that we are world leaders or we're so influential. And the truth is that that Security Council includes many nations that are not, I mean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, or they've got Caribbean nations, they've got small nations, I can't remember right now, but not influential nations are on the Security Council. So I don't know why we really are so concerned about that. There are also nations which really are contrary to human rights. China has a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. So it's not, in my mind, it's no marker of prestige.
Interesting. Now, in a National Post commentary by 4 infectious disease doctors, they discussed their study, which showed in Canada the individual rate of death from COVID-19 for people under 65 is 0.0006%. So this is what, the equivalent risk of dying in a vehicle accident? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, we all get in cars almost every day, and we don't even think about it. So that's why when people still want to wear these masks, I can't even go back to Canada to visit my family right now. Right, I've got family in Quebec, and there's a block on non-essential travel crossing the border. This is insane. We are going to such great lengths and hurting ourselves for no good reason. And it just is mass hysteria, to be frank. It's really, maybe at the outset when we had so little information we didn't know, fine, okay, people made rash decisions. But we've had 2 months of experience with this now. We know with the situation, we know it is such a low risk for people who are not immunocompromised. So yes, the risk is so low that it's very hard to justify at this point. And it just shows too, this is where I'm so glad that you let me speak, and I'm glad to work with your network, that you're letting alternative voices be heard, because so much media is fear driven. And so they want to pile up these casualty rates or death counts or whatever. And we know that data is very difficult to scrutinize, to confirm. So I'm glad that gradually alternative media in particular, and the National Post you mentioned, have been giving another perspective here and showing that the risk is so low, it's been blown totally out of proportion.
Wow. Now, Fergus, during this time of COVID-19, there have been unprecedented stimulus packages constantly rolling out, both in the States and Canada, of course. In the States, it's costing the U.S. $2.2 trillion, surpassing the amount of $24 trillion, right, in the national debt?
Well, no. Basically, there's no hope of ever paying the national debt off in the United States. And I just heard that the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve is now $7 trillion, and I think it went up to three or 4 trillion in just the last couple of months. So the expansion is unprecedented. And the reason why this is actually going to lead to inflationary pressure is the way that not only are they printing money digitally, they have constrained the economy. At least in the US, it's less constrained now. But when you both constrain economic activity and inflate the currency, naturally you will generate inflation. And so both in Canada and the United States, the real interest rates now are below zero. So in the US, it's at zero. In Canada, I think 0.75%, the retail rate. And so you are looking, basically we're building a new bubble to create a new financial crisis in the future by all this easy credit, rather than basically tightening our belts and showing a little bit of common sense that actually when there's less economic activity, we should be spending less, not more. And we should be opening the economy as swiftly as possible to allow people to be productive. Because if we all stay at home, it's just common sense that if we all stay at home and don't go to work, who's going to produce anything? It's ridiculous. So it can be painful for me to talk about, really, because just like you, I care about Canada's future, and I just see us being our own worst enemies.
You're saying it true. Maybe explain how inflation, because you talked about inflation, explain how inflation is a hidden tax. How is the cost of inflation, how is that determined?
Well, sadly, it is a tax on some people more than on others. So the point is that people who are on fixed income, so if you've set a contract for a year and there's inflation, if prices are rising, if the currency is devaluing, you're getting paid less. But if you are an owner of assets, shares, or other, let's say utilities, your incomes can rise, right? They can be buffered by inflation. So it's basically a tax on the working class, the people who hold cash and earn set amounts. Obviously, anyone who's holding cash, you're being fleeced right now. And that's why it's such an irony that progressives will often promote modern monetary theory or greater spending through money creation, because it's really fleecing the most vulnerable among us who don't have the capacity to offset that inflation, who don't have the capacity to buy non-dollar denominated assets. So anyone who's earning in a set currency amount or holding set currency, you are being taxed through inflation, and your purchasing power is going down in an unequal manner. So it's basically a regressive tax on Canadians.
Wow, a burden. Fergus, we are out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your time with us. It's great to have you on the show.
Jeanette, I'm proud to be with you. All the best for your channel. Cheers.
The energy sector is still reeling as the price of oil dipped into negative territory. It has devastated our economy in Alberta and a lot of Canada. David Yeager is an energy policy analyst and author of the new book, From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. He also recently wrote an interesting article entitled COVID-19 Will Greatly Reduce Support for the Anti-Oil Movement. David, welcome back to BCN.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now, you write about how the climate change and anti-oil movement started and how the power of social media, and politicians have really contributed to this. Can you explain in further detail, remembering that Bridge City News is not mainstream media?
No, but it is really a high water phenomenon. The most interesting book I read was called The Progress Paradox in 2003. And it was, how come when the world keeps getting better, everybody think it's getting worse? It's like human nature. But his comment was, Western society has been so successful, in part because of fossil fuels, that people had the luxury of being able to worry about how they felt. The basic necessities of food, shelter, clothing, and income were taken care of. So it was a society based on feelings and moods. So it's into this very successful society that you introduce climate change. What will the weather be like in the year 2050 or will 2100? And if you are, looking under rocks for food, or you're working 2 jobs to pay the rent, this is really first world issues. And so we've been, most of this century, things have been going well. The society's been good. People have had jobs. People have had income. They could worry about less pressing things than the necessities of life. And that has all changed in the last 60 days. People are locked in the house, losing their jobs. The layoffs are huge. And so I'm just thinking that in the end, all the attention politically paid to climate change was successful because there was a lot of voter support, because everything else was taken care of. So my question is, in the last election, for example, in the article, I pointed out that 29% of the people thought that climate change was a major issue. I'd like to run that poll again in July and say, what is your major issue, and see if it even registers. So politics tends to go where the votes are. This is where the votes have been. My thesis is they will not be there in the immediate future for all the reasons we're starting to learn as we live through our lives in this horrid mess.
Now, you say that people are really easy to scare. Sometimes we rely too much on big government and forget how wealth is actually created.
Well, that's been the history of end of the world phenomena. If you know what to look for, if you go back to even Malthus in the 1700s, after the printing press was invented, he was figured there was more people than there was food, and we were all going to die. Then it was Silent Spring in the early 60s with DDT, pesticides, we were all going to die. Then there was the population bomb and Paul Ehrlich in 1986. We were all going to die. And then the Club of Rome, we were going to run out of resources in the 1970s. And so there's a recurring phenomena through here, is it's almost a default element of human nature, is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so maybe it's in our DNA that we're actually worried about things like this. But so I guess we are easy to scare. And the COVID is a perfect example. 99.95% of the people of Alberta have not tested positive, and yet nobody will go near anybody. So perhaps it's human nature, perhaps it's overemphasized. But yeah, this is getting people to worry about what's going to happen next. It appears to be quite easy.
You know, a lot of Canadians are being reminded, David, of what it takes to have a good economy. Alberta is getting hammered right now, as we talked about earlier. Oil prices in negative territory for the first time ever. The Liberals did offer a financial aid package, $1.7 billion towards cleaning up the abandoned oil and gas wells, another $750 million to cut methane emissions, plus some expanded credit lines for smaller companies. But how much of this will really help?
Well, it can't hurt. I'm just actually researching that right now, trying to understand how bad it is. There's nobody making money unless you've got your production hedged, which is forward sold. You cannot produce barrel oil profitably at these prices. So everybody is hemorrhaging cash and cutting their capital programs. So you can't do too much assistance. You provide too much assistance at this time. The real issue has been, is this sufficient? And that's what people are worried about. I mean, the fact is, the government, it's a lot easier to respond to the COVID situation than it is to understand what you've done. Like, we have to quit moving, ground airlines, strand cruise ships, put yellow tape around the swing set at the playground so the kids can't come in contact with each other. Shutting down and locking down the economy is really quite easy, for all the various levels of politicians to sound concerned and have the police go around and give away tickets. The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how. So the thing is, the politicians today are much more able to recognize a problem and tell you what to do than they are to fix it. Just like climate change. We should quit using fossil fuels. Oh, good idea. Now what? Well, that's a little more complicated. So again, telling everybody nobody moves, nobody gets hurt, shutting down the economy, that was relatively easily compared to what it's going to take to prevent it from collapsing completely and bringing it back.
So, David, why is it that the Liberal Party is so hesitant to provide a major financial bailout to the energy sector like they did previously with the auto industry?
I think it's a lot more there's two elements. One is there's the politics in the sense that this is a party, a fairly polarized party on the subject of oil and climate change. They won the election in part on anti-oil climate policy. And so it's not intuitive that they should help these people. I would say that this particular government is not particularly gifted in the area of economic management. If you look at this particular crop, it's a tough time to have people with this little economic bench strength, if you will. The second thing is and this is in all fairness to the current governments at all levels, this is unprecedented. No one has ever dealt with anything like this. And so what do we do? I do know that the conversations between the Minister of Energy and the industry have been continuous with finance and the banks. Like they know they have to do something and they are asking for guidance on what to do. The question is what to do. So everybody, it's sort of like COVID. It's easy to say what not to do. I mean, say we need help. The government never said we don't need help. You're the only source of funds. The government has said they've never admitted that there's another source of funds. Check out your mattress, clean out your mattress. That's already been done. The question is, what do we give to who? So what I'm hoping is that as the gravity of the situation becomes more apparent, particularly at the federal level, what I'm hoping is they'll take tribal partisan politics. A lot of politics in the modern era, the reason people are so jaded about politics and politicians is they're more inclined to worry about keeping their job than doing their job. What I'm hoping is the current situation is so severe that it's time to start thinking about what's best for the country, not the next election. And I in phoning around, I think they're coming around to that. I sure hope so.
What's interesting too, David, is how many people are out there saying that they want to see the energy sector just die. Oil and gas just go away completely. Yet how many Canadians are aware that essential elements of personal protective equipment, life-sustaining equipment, right, like the gloves, masks, respirators, are all petroleum-based products, even the hand sanitizer?
There's an incredible energy knowledge and energy product information vacuum that has emerged. There was the idea that has been put forward, and really no one's heard, many don't believe otherwise, that all we need to do to replace oil and gas with wind and solar is political will. I mean, people communicate with each other on the way to the pipeline protest with a plastic phone. There's really no understanding of the supply chain, nor has there been any need to understand the supply chain. This goes back to what I was talking about, the progress paradox. Things are going well. Why do I have to worry about where things come from? I never run out of anything. There's been no shortages of anything. If I don't have a job, you got a guaranteed income supplement, like the ability to book off and go chase how you feel instead of how you got here or how you're going to stay here. It's been fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things the author, Alec Epstein, concluded. He says, I suppose if society's gotten to the point where the only thing they have to worry about is whether they're happy or not, he says, I suppose that's progress, and it is. So there's a giant. This goes back to the original question you asked me when we started this interview. There's a big reality check coming, as people have more time stuck in the house. What is it? And so the people have time to listen to other narratives now. Where will my next job come from? And I'd say that right now, if the oil and gas industry could get back to work, and people started to want to hire people, I can't imagine anyone's going to say, well, no, we'd rather you stayed at home. I mean, these jobs are going to be critical to the recovery of the Canadian economy.
It appears that some of the anti-oil support is coming from the younger generation, those people who grew up watching Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. Will this change their mindset from the idea that the mission of climate salvation is more important than the economy? Do you think that reality is maybe setting in for some people right now?
This is the first time they've had tough times, and why? I think this is the great question. Why is it? Why have I lost my job? Why has the price of oil collapsed? Yes, this is the fundamental change in your life and in your future, that the shock treatment, I think, that people have been wondering, is this what we have to do? Do we have to starve everybody out to get their attention? Well, it's underway, whether we had to or not, whether it was intentional or unintentional. This is going to be a great learning moment for the generation that's really had more esoteric things to worry about. So I'm inclined to agree with everything you said. Yeah, you're going to learn where plastic comes from when you can't get it. You're going to, and so on and so forth. You're going to learn how important the oil jobs are because they don't exist anymore. And so as the deficit goes up, and it's all that's why I say I think what's happened is that the state of the economy, or the changes in the economy that this shutdown has created, is much greater than people's understanding of just what we've done here and how long it's going to take to turn it around. But that's happening at lightning speed, unfortunately, as more people lose their jobs and their savings.
So once the COVID-19 pandemic is passed and things return to some kind of normal, will the anti-oil movement go right back to pressuring governments to spend billions upon billions of dollars to shut down the fossil fuel industry and replace it with renewable energy?
There's two elements to this. There's the professional environmentalists that they do this for a living, and they're always looking from one crusade. If you go back in the book, I went back, the history of Greenpeace was in saving the whales and nuclear testing. It's the issue of the day. If it isn't fossil fuels, they'll find another one, and they'll morph because that's their jobs. The question is how is this going to resonate with the voters? It's not so much that there's always going to be an environmental movement. There always will be. There'll always be people that in this area advising us what not to do. The question is will politicians, in their hunt for votes, will this crystallize itself in voter support? That's what's happened with the climate change movement, is there's been discernible pools of voters emerge, and people have identified them. The Green Party, for example, Elizabeth May, she won more seats than ever on a platform to shut down the oil sands. Obviously, she didn't have any candidates in Fort McMurray. The Liberal Party has identified a loyal group of voters among the climate concerned. The question is not so much will there be pressure for them to worry about climate change from the environmentalists. That's one thing. The question is, will there be the voter support at the polls? That's my thesis. My thesis is that what the voters of Canada want the government to do next, that is what has changed.
Can you comment on the push for renewable energy and the goal we keep hearing, net zero emissions by the year 2030 or 2050? Is that realistic?
It's easier to say than do. I've talked to a lot of people or read a lot of material. Equinor is the old Statoil out of Norway. and they have adopted and of course, Norway's thought as being uber green, and they have said, well, we're net zero by 2050. So then you have to go back and say, well, that's nice. Well, I tend to peel back the onion and read the story below the headline. And what they called that was a wonderful opportunity for research and development. Meaning we actually don't know how we're going to do it yet, and we're going to have to develop the means to do it. So the commitment is one thing, the means is unknown, and so there's no one has explained to my satisfaction how they're going to go net zero by 2050. It's just the path of least resistance has been the path of least resistance is just say you're going to do it and buy yourself a little fresh air. And 20 years, of course, that's or 30 years. The beauty of those who commit to net zero by 2050 today is 30 years out. They certainly, if they're not dead, they certainly won't be in the jobs they're in when they made the commitment. But no, I would say that the whole world is going to rethink this, is going to look at their priorities now. I mean, this is not just confined to Canada. This is happening all over Europe, all over the Western world. There's 7.5 billion people on Earth that are being impoverished in some way at the present time. That is the people to ask, not Greenpeace or not Justin Trudeau, what they think. What do the people of the world think? And this is a reset, I think, of priorities back to the basics.
David, we got 30 seconds left here. Quickly, what is your overall outlook for the Alberta energy industry?
We're not going away anytime soon. The one thing about low oil prices is they really have put an arrow through the heart of the renewables. Renewables need higher oil prices, not lower oil prices. I believe that oil is going to be around for a long time. We got a lot of it. We're going to make a big comeback. I just can't tell you exactly when.
Okay, thanks so much, David. David Yeager, energy policy analyst and author of From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.